This episode is brought to you by Bumble. So, you want to find someone you're compatible with, specifically someone who's ready for a serious connection, totally open to having kids in the future, is a tall, rock-climbing Libra, and loves rom-coms with vegan pizzas on Tuesdays just as much as you do. Bumble knows that you know exactly what's right for you. So whatever it is you're looking for, Bumble's features can help you find it. Date now on Bumble.
91 Donkey Lane is a magical apartment complex that contains immense power but lacks intelligent inhabitants.
What is happening?
I'm getting texts.
Why are we getting a lot of texts?
People found out what we did.
Oh, dividing Mike Myers into an infinite amount of tiny Mike Myers?
Listen to 91 Donkey Lane for free on Spotify or your favorite podcasting app. More at 91donkeylane.com. See you there, you donkeys.
Welcome back to YA OK. I am Alyssa, and we have Eric
And
here.
I am Eric J. Brown.
We are joined today to talk about Skater Boy, which is a book written by Anthony Nerada. Did I say that right? Nerada?
Nerada,
like
Nevada.
And
which is where he kind of was in between when he got the idea for it.
Yes, between Nevada and Phoenix, he said, which is crazy. Yeah. He was doing a very, very long road trip. I loved learning about his book and his whole writing process. And I think that we are also 2 for 2 on people who write in a less chaotic way than you do, Eric.
Yeah, both of them. You know what? I need to get somebody who does an outline on this show. Because now I look like a psychopath. Just
it's
like
so funny,
pantsing all the way to like 100,000 words, and then I have 2 people who are outlining books and then writing like 65,000 word drafts. Like, it's unfair.
Yeah,
I'm not represented in this podcast.
Well, you know, there's always going to be more episodes, and I think that that's the representation that we need.
Yeah, representation matters, and I think so. I think we need some Panthers on here.
I would agree. Anthony's book is called Skater Boy, and he was inspired by Avril Lavigne's Skater Boy, and he's Canadian.
Yes, and who knows if Avril Lavigne really is Avril Lavigne anymore? What's her name? Is it Melissa?
Melissa? Is
that the conspiracy?
Is the conspiracy name, I think?
I've always heard about it, but I've never actually done a deep dive because I'm like, oh, that's completely ridiculous. I like that. And I just leave it there.
I think that that's a fair attitude to have. We talked a little bit about conspiracy theories and how I prefer one that's just like completely harmless and means nothing to no one. And that's one of them for sure. Although I did accidentally, I don't remember if I told you this story yet. I don't think I did, but I accidentally almost went down a path of a flat earth theory. Because someone on TikTok was talking about how in Antarctica, there's like a wall, the Arctic wall. And apparently on the other side of the wall is where there's like all of these other like islands and shit where all the rich people are. And like Tupac is there and like all this stuff. And I was like, wow, that's a wild theory. And of course, I'm like, that feels like that harms no one. I'm just going to keep looking. And then I went on YouTube and I looked it up to see if like anyone had done any, and it was immediately flat earth. And I was like, oops, I went too far. I had to back my way out of there. I was like, we're not doing that. Immediately ran out.
Oh, so they mean there is a wall and then it's the complete opposite side of the flat earth. That's what, okay, got it.
I guess so, yeah. Yeah, whatever it was, that's where it led me. And I dipped out of there really quick.
What is your favorite like non-harmful conspiracy theory?
The Avril Lavigne one might be it because it's really not hard. It's really not harmful at all. It's just like so silly. Do you have a favorite conspiracy theory aside from the Avril Lavigne one?
I did have one, and I completely forget what it is now. I have to look up what it was because there was somebody talking about it on Twitter, I think.
Yeah.
Where they were like, "What do you think? Like, what's your favorite conspiracy theory that isn't rooted in anti-Semitism or isn't harmful to anybody?"
Yeah.
And it was this like little thread of all of them, and some of them I was like, there was one that like specifically I was like, oh my God, that's really cute. I kind of wish that was real.
That's really
and now
cute.
I can't remember what it was. And like even when I Google non-harmful conspiracy theory, I can't find it. Well, there's just a whole list of conspiracy theories, but
There's one about Nicolas Cage being a vampire from the Civil War era, which is
I did see that one.
Wild. What are we doing? That's a good one.
And then he came and played Dracula in that Nicholas Hoult movie. Renfield, that's what it is.
That's probably, I'm assuming that's got to be connected in this whole theory. I haven't dug into that whole theory.
He's just trying to throw us off.
Yeah.
He's also in Dead by Daylight. His character is in Dead by Daylight now, the video game.
Okay, see, he's hinting it to us. He's like, it's like a little wink every now and then. He's like, the real ones know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, let's talk to Anthony about Skater Boy and only just a little bit about conspiracy theories before this turns into like a UFO podcast.
You are my universe. You are my universe. And I'm just a planet.
So today we have Anthony Nerada. His debut, Skater Boy, comes out February 6th. And Anthony, can you just give us a pitch of it? So tell us about Skater Boy.
Yeah, totally. So Skater Boy follows the life of resident bad boy Wesley Big Mac McKenzie as he, stumbles and navigates through his senior year of high school. When readers are first introduced to him, Wes is going down a really bad path in his life. He's failing miserably in his classes. He's setting things on fire, and he just doesn't really know where he fits in the grand scheme of things. And it's really not until he meets out and proud ballet dancer or ballerino Tristan that Wes really starts to realize that he can be more than what the world has told him he is, and there's so much more outside of high school life for him, and he just has to open himself up to those experiences.
That's great.
I love that.
Thank you for coming in today. I'm excited to talk about this book.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So what was the inspiration for it? What kind of sparked the idea where you're like, oh, that's what I'm going to write about?
Was it Avril Lavigne's Skater Boy? How involved was Avril Lavigne's Skater Boy in the creation of this book is my first
because you are Canadian, right?
I am a true bred Canadian, and the song, of course, how can I ever avoid that? I'll say the song and the basic premise of the ballerino and the punk skater boy is kind of where it ends. It is evolved to its own kind of story. But my journey for this story was very, very specific. I can pinpoint it to the exact moment when I ideated this story. And that was on a 5-week road trip home from Orlando, Florida, back to Vancouver, BC, where I'm from. My fiance and I, we spent a year working at Walt Disney World down in Orlando, and we decided at the end of the program that we would just take our time, see as much of the States as we can, because whoever has an opportunity to drive across the States for 5 weeks. So we were on our trip, and it was between Nevada and Arizona that Avril's song came on, and I was just transported to this time when I was a kid in the back of my parents' car, where I would always sing my heart out in the back seat. I have a vivid memory of my older sister being like, "Stop singing so loud! We can't even hear the artist." But to me, the back of my family's car was very much my auditorium. That's where I shone, and so when I thought about it, and I was thinking about the time when I was closeted and in that car, and when I would switch the pronouns in the songs that I was singing in my head so that I could experience those happily ever afters, it just dawned on me in that car ride. I was like, this would be an incredible queer love story, and it would be an incredible YA queer love story if I had a punk and a ballerino. And so from there, I was like, I switched off the song, and I was like, stop talking. It was my fiance and our friend from Norway in the back seat. And I was like, stop talking. I need to focus. And that stretch of driving, I fleshed out exactly what I was going to write, to the point where 75 to 80% of that storyline is still in the book today, because I was I just saw it in my head, and I'm like, I'm going to go for it.
I love that. You were like, everyone shut up.
Yeah,
Nobody
I
say
really was.
anything frivolous.
I was like, my creativity is going. Like, you guys all need to be quiet.
Oh my
And
god.
everybody's just sitting there like, oh, we should just be
I
quiet,
know.
right?
They were like,
What about this? No. Yeah.
shut up. I love the idea of like Avril Lavigne's Skater Boy being on, and that was like the catalyst for you being like, everyone be quiet, and everyone was like, oh my god, what's going on? Oh my god.
Yeah.
I love how that whole story came to be. Do you remember what state you were in when you were doing that's a long drive.
Yeah, it was a really long drive, and I remember like 10 to 12 hour days of driving, and like we have never tried to do that since because that was
Yeah.
just way too much. But
Uh,
yeah, I was between Nevada and Arizona.
oh yeah,
Somewhere.
Nevada. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That is such a great story. I love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So were you in college, or not college, high school, were you more of one, you a punk? Were you setting things on fire? I mean, or were you a ballerina for that matter?
Yeah, right. And it's a good question because people who have known me my entire life, who have read Skater Boy, are like, where the hell did all this anger come from? Like, this is so not you. Because I was student council president in high school. Like, I was involved in all the extracurricular activities. Like, I loved drama, though I was never in any of the productions.
Mhm.
Because I mean, that's a whole other story. But yeah, I was very much like a go-getter, like an A plus student. I mean, I had my entire head was spiked with gel, and I was like, I wore camo, and I was like in love with like My Chemical Romance and Panic! At the
Okay.
Disco and Avril. But to the exterior, to the outside world, I was very much like A plus goody two shoes. So it's very funny that this ends up being my debut.
That's so funny.
Punk
But
aesthetic, but really nice.
Yeah.
no, but that's like honestly, I was part of the whole like emo kid scene when I was in high school, and I feel like that was the vibe. Like everyone was emo, so everyone was just like very emotional, and we just
Yeah.
wanted to like wear our little like camo Hot Topic whatever,
Right?
and still be overachievers, moonlight as something scarier than that. But I also this is your debut novel, and before this you were working in PR, I think I saw. Is that right?
Yeah, well, my background is in communications and public relations.
Okay.
I have a diploma in publishing, I have a diploma in public relations, and I have a
God.
bachelor's degree in psychology. And so,
Wow.
yeah, I was doing odd PR jobs in downtown Vancouver here and there, but nothing like really spoke to me, and that's why I just quit everything and drove down to Disney World for a year because I was
Love
like, I don't
that.
want to face reality.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm currently working as a talent acquisition coordinator in recruitment for the visual effects company underneath the Disney umbrella, Industrial Light and Magic. So
Cool.
I'm very much still kind of in that realm. Like I run the social media for Lucasfilm and Industrial Light and Magic on LinkedIn, but outside of that, I am not in that world really anymore.
That's very cool. Well, I did exactly one PR internship, and that sparked enough rage for me to write a book where there was lots of rage in it, I think. So that was where my mind went. I was like, that's where the rage is from, PR.
Hey, good. That's a good idea because one of my clients in my internship was like a gas company, and I remember turning to like my coworker and being like, "We're working for the devil."
Yeah.
You know that, right?
You're working for the bad guys.
Yeah. And I was like, "How did I end up here?"
Yeah, that's where the rage came from. Now we know.
Yeah, 100%.
That's it.
So funny.
Wanting to set things on fire with
Exactly.
gasoline from the company that you were doing PR for.
This all makes sense now.
It's all coming together. It always
Yeah.
does.
Well, good. I'm glad you found like a healthy outlet that also pays
Yeah.
you. So,
Right? Exactly.
One of the major themes in this book is about identity, but specifically within the queer community. And I know that like with Wes, he kind of like struggles with feeling like, oh, well, I am not gay enough, and like there's like Tristan who is doing like ballet, and people can look at him and be like, oh, well, he's obviously gay because he's doing ballet. And it's like, why do you think we as humans feel the need to kind of fit specific molds of what a queer person looks like or acts like or what they enjoy? Because it's like there's so many like parts of like media and people who just say, oh, well, this is not gay enough, or this is too gay. And it's like, I just hate hearing about that. But like, why do you think we need to kind of put people in boxes like that?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And I think it has so many layers, and we could
Yeah.
probably talk about this forever. But in general, what I think this boils down to is it's just human nature for us to desire or seek like a sense of belonging. We all want to belong to something, whether that's like a specific group or like a particular subset of people that share the same interests or passions or commonalities, what have you. Um, and what I find so interesting about that, and actually quite polarizing in the queer community specifically, is that we are often fed in the media one like very specific mold of a queer person. And that queer person, especially when I was growing up, like that queer person is usually white, promiscuous, and like has rippling six pack. And if you don't fit that mold, it's like what does that say to that kid, that closeted kid watching? And like what does that say when you don't feel you see yourself in the media? And so I think it's really hard because the on the one hand, like we all want to believe we belong to something and we all seek that validation. But when you don't see yourself in the media or you don't see yourself in the friend groups that you're with, it's like it can be very isolating and polarizing, especially in the queer community.
Yeah. And especially like for like teens, I'm glad that there are books like this because teens who, I mean, we as adults can look at somebody and be like, oh, what, you think I'm not gay enough? Okay, I don't care. It doesn't matter what you think. But like teens might have that in their head where they're like, oh, well, I'm not interested in Drag Race. I think it's fine, but I don't like watching it that much. And then you can have other kids who are like really into Drag Race and might even be straight. Like, I don't
Yeah.
feel like we need to put everybody in these boxes that say what is too queer or not queer enough. But I think that teens need to be kind of shown that like there's plenty of the entire umbrella of queer culture we can fit under and we can go anywhere within that.
Yeah. I always think it's weird when people are talking about, and it's always a straight man talking about a gay friend or whatever, and they'll be like, but you would never know that they're gay. I'm like, what does that even mean? Do you ask people that? That's so weird. Like, you just say, would you imagine like introducing yourself the way, hi, I'm Alyssa and I'm gay? Like, you would never do that. So, what does that even mean? You would never even know. Like, if they don't act that gay, what does that mean? It's just so silly. And I, I appreciate having the representation of somebody like Wes because then it gives, like you were saying, like an example of just a different way to represent what we see in the media, which is honestly what we see in the media is just really silly and just homophobic, that all of the gay people that you ever meet are going to be like extremely feminine and have to conform to this one little like prototype. It's just silly.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work in the restaurant industry, and I would have so many guests be like, "Oh, like you don't look gay," and I'm like,
That's
"Oh, well,
psychotic.
what does that look like to you? Like, what do you mean? What should I look like?"
Right.
And so, but it's true. Like, I totally struggled as a kid because I never felt like I was gay enough to be a gay man, and I never felt
Mm.
like I was straight enough to be. Of course, I was not straight enough to be a straight man. So I was
Missed the
always
mark.
grappling with, yeah, just a little. But I was always like, well, where, who are my people then? Because I don't really resonate with anyone,
Mm.
if that's what you're saying. And and that was very much one of my major drives with Skater Boy and Wes particularly, because we often are told about the angry gay guy, but it usually ends in death or prison. Like there are very minimal stories that end happily for these people,
Hmm.
and it's like that's not fair. I don't believe that is fair for a character like Wes, because you can make mistakes, but you can grow and you can learn from those mistakes. Like you shouldn't have to be stuck in that label as a punk, as a hothead, just because of circumstantial things in your life that have dictated that that's how you should react in that moment. And so I really wanted to explore what that would look like in a teenager who has his whole life ahead of him, but is so constrained and feels like he's suffocating underneath these labels that he's been given by the outside world.
Hmm. Yeah.
I love that. It's like a kind of dismantling toxic masculinity for Wes and like kind of getting him out of there in a like healthier headspace. It's
Yeah.
great.
Absolutely. and I do that too with a few of my other characters. Like Wes is a part of a 3 guy group named the Tripod. They affectionately call themselves the Tripod,
Love
and
it.
they all are struggling with toxic masculinity in different forms. And I really wanted to explore how that looks like for these 3 different characters who have these 3 very different lived experiences as well. Because toxic masculinity is not talked enough about, I think.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think even like the nuances of it, talking about toxic masculinity, even within the queer community and how it still represents within the queer community, is also not a conversation that's being had enough. And I feel like I
Yeah.
see it a lot on like the feminism side of social media where they'll say like toxic masculinity affects everybody. It affects straight people. It affects everybody. But to have the conversation in the queer community is kind of new. So that's great that you like that was a focus and kind of a priority in story building like that.
Yeah, thank you. I always like to say that this book is very much Wes is very much more grumpy than he is sunshine, and I really wanted just to tell this perspective from that
Mhm.
point of view.
That is one of my favorite tropes too. I love Grumpy Sunshine.
Grumpy
Right?
I think
sunshine.
it's kind of like the opposites attract kind of thing, and I just think it's so perfect.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
works.
yeah, I agree.
So this kind of we touched on it a little bit, but Wes's growth in this book, it reminded me of a few things that I've seen in some rom-coms, and I think I'm seeing it more in adult than YA. I think we're slowly kind of catching up into YA, where it's not just about like the love interest doesn't create the change. It's not the
Mm.
reason for the change. It's like the person actually chooses to change themselves because they see themselves become a better person this way. And maybe the catalyst for that is them falling in love with this person, but they're not changing for love. They're changing maybe because they're in love, or it's not just that kind of like, oh well, the only way I can change is if this specific person changes me, and that's it. Like I love that it's not like that. It's more, I'm going to change for myself because I'm trying to figure out who I am as a person.
Yeah, I resonate with that a lot because in the editing of Skater Boy with my editor and really like peeling back those layers of him, my biggest struggle in writing this book was creating a believable angry character that people could relate to and like want to root for by the end of the
Mm.
Yeah,
story.
that's a fine line too, because you could piss people off very early.
Oh, how fast I blocked Goodreads because I knew that it was going to happen. I knew it. Like it was inevitable. People want the sunshine characters. They don't really want the grumpy, especially if they're like grumpy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the first page of Skater Boy, like Wes is confronting another kid who's about to get him in trouble, and like it can produce a visceral reaction. Like I wanted people to have a visceral reaction to that because I wanted you to see him at point A at the beginning of the story, and hopefully you learn to love him by point B, right?
Mhm.
And so it was really fun to explore that. But when I started writing the story, like I just wanted it to be a lighthearted rom-com. Like I did not expect it to be the story that it ended up being. But when Wes showed me his like true colors, like when he started like yelling at me on the page, I was like, okay, how do I take this character that readers are like genuinely probably gonna hate at the beginning and like craft a story around him that leaves them also feeling satisfied. And what it boiled down to for the most part was like, if Wes doesn't love himself first, like how is he, or like learns to love himself, how is he going to do that and by falling in love with someone else?
Mm.
And so, and especially with Tristan, like with a person who challenges him to his very core, just by asking him like questions that no one has ever asked him before, like really like what do you want to do with your life, like how do you see yourself, what are you passionate about, like you were very talented at this without it giving any spoilers, and like why don't you try exploring that, and it's only when like he asks those questions that Wes is like, oh, like maybe I can do those things, like maybe I can challenge what I think of myself and how the world sees me and like reconcile those 2 images. And so yeah, it was a really cool exploration of character for on my part anyway.
That's very cool, especially because I talk a lot about, I do like relationship and sex education stuff, that kind of thing on social media and whatever.
Love it.
And so one of the things that I've talked about is that you don't necessarily need to be like completely healed and like this final finished version of yourself to find love and be in love with someone and have healthy relationships. But what has to happen is that kind of communication where like you can find
Totally.
vulnerability and trust within each other. And like you don't have to show up to every relationship a completely finished product. And I think you end up building really deep, meaningful connections when you end up bringing that out in each other. So I love that that's represented there too.
And I love that you say that too, because I mean, I'm gonna give some spoilers because my two favorite lines in this book is when Tristan says to Wes, like, maybe there is vulnerability in truth and being truthful to who you are. And another one where Wes's ma, who is like my favorite character in my entire book, she says to Wes, like, maybe being who you are is like being in the middle of who you are and who you want to be. And I think that's a beautiful answer to this question too. Like, in order to go through your character growth, your character arc, like you need to realize what's important to you, and you need to realize how you're going to get to point B when you are so stuck in point A.
Yeah. And point B is a goalpost that always is moving. Like you're gonna reach that. Yeah, you'll reach that goal and then you'll be like, actually, I think that I could be an even better person, an even better version of myself. And you're gonna keep pushing and moving like that. So I like that. I like that mindset of like I think you're forever in the middle of who you were and who you're trying to be. And that just like moves up. The bracket just keeps moving as you keep growing. I think that's very cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
91 Donkey Lane is a magical apartment complex that contains immense power but lacks intelligent inhabitants.
What is happening?
I'm getting texts.
Why are we getting a lot of texts?
People found out what we did.
Oh, dividing Mike Myers into an infinite amount of tiny Mike Myers?
Listen to 91 Donkey Lane for free on Spotify or your favorite podcasting app. More at 91donkeylane.com. See you there, you donkeys.
I also love that you said that like Wes was telling you who he was like while you were writing it.
Screaming at you.
It's one of those things. It's one of those things that as a writer you can't like. It sounds weird when you say it's like, oh no, the character did this. It really wasn't me, because everyone's like, what do you mean? You created them. And it's like, there is some kind of like little bit of magic where they are still their own person because they're telling you. And like, you will be writing, like you'll write an entire draft and you'll be like, why isn't this working? I can't figure out what's working. And it's because you're trying to push the character to do something that you want them to do when they are not that kind of person. They're not that kind of character. They can't do that. So like you do have to listen to your character as you're writing it, because they will tell you, this is what I'm going to do. And then if it's like, if you want to change the book and you want to like turn it into, keep like whatever outline, if you outline beforehand, you still need to listen to them and say, okay, well then how do I get you where you are into where I need you to be for the book? And how is that going to work? Exactly. How did it work for you, actually? That's a good question. Was it difficult, like, was during editing, or was it pretty much like that moment you got the inspiration, you kind of figured out who the character was, and then he was like, this is my whole story right here?
Yeah, no, definitely. When I sold Skater Boy to Soho Teen, like my draft that they got and they bought was so, like, Wes was he was such a prick, and I had to like dial it back almost, because he, like, the amount of F words and like I had to remove from this book were astounding. But yeah, what my editor did really well, and she's like my guardian angel. Like, she really made me sit back and sit in the feelings of Wes in every chapter. I am a chronic underwriter. Like, the draft that they bought was like 68,000 words. And I stupidly just assumed that people would know what Wes was thinking in XYZ moments. And my editor was really, really good at telling me, like, okay, like, sit back and like, what would he actually be feeling right now? And what would he actually be doing right now? And so I had to do a really big deep dive into his character while I was in the middle of my revisions and my like deadlines. But I think it ended up being a really beautiful the end result ended up being really beautiful because I really did peel back those layers and see what made him tick, and I hope it worked on the page.
Well, from what I've seen so far, it has absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
How many F words did end up in the book at the end?
You know what? Actually, as I was saying that, I'm like, I probably should do a count because it was very likely over 100, and I'm sure there's only like 20 now.
I did
Oh,
a search. I think in my debut, I did a search, and I think I had like 87 at one point.
damn.
And I think I did cut it down to I want to say around 40 or 50. I have to
Yeah,
double
it's a
check
good threshold.
because like I mean, I probably could have kept it in. I'm not sure if your editor told you to take out F words. Like, you probably used it too much. But it's like, it's one of the things that I'm thinking when I'm rereading the book where I'm like, oh, I did just use the F word like 2 pages ago. Maybe I shouldn't
Yeah.
use it that much. I
Yeah.
mean, we
Yeah,
could get away with it. They're not going to tell us, oh, you can't. I actually, for my third book, I got away with the C word. I put it in there twice. It's it's cuntiness,
wow.
Okay.
but
Yeah,
it was just the fact I was like kind of started typing out bitchiness, and I was like, I'm gonna see if I can get away
yeah.
with this. Nobody has flagged it yet, so
That's so funny.
Hey, that word is Australia's F word, so really.
yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
And in the UK too, they use it like it's nothing.
Yeah, there you go.
We're getting on board in the US. I like it. I like it.
good. Yeah.
It's so
Slowly
funny.
but surely.
So this is your debut. What was your road to publishing like for you? Like, what was the querying process, and then like walk us through the submission process as well? Because you've already kind of touched on the editing process.
Yeah, it was long. I finished my very first novel in 2009, 2010. So and I landed an agent with Skater Boy in 2020. So it took me 10 years of writing and querying and being rejected over and over again until I landed my agent. I actually participated in the what then was known as Twitter contest DV Pit. And so, like diverse voices, you pitch your book and you try to get agents' attentions. And I just happened to include the lyrics of Avril Lavigne, but I changed it to be queer coded,
Oh.
and people just loved it enough that it was like one of the trending topics in that day's DV Pit. And so I got a lot of attention from that moment after 10 years of like nothing.
Wow.
And so I ended up landing my what was then my agent, and we edited the book for a couple months, and then we went out on submission to editors like right on the onset of Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement and the pandemic, and publishing coming to a roaring halt.
Ugh.
And so I spent 2 years on submission before Skater Boy sold. So by the time this book hits bookshelves on February 6th, it will really be 4.5 years old.
Wow.
It's been a very long time.
Wait, I'm not in the book industry, so what does on submission mean?
Yeah, that means that once you have an agent and you've polished up your manuscript to the best it can be,
Mm-hmm.
your agent then shops that book around to editors
Okay.
in publishing houses in North America, around the world, what have you, and then with the hopes that they'll then buy that book and go to acquisition.
Got it. Okay. I'm learning a lot of
And
my.
it's usually a really long process. I will say you had to have a similar trajectory as me. I remember seeing your pitch on DV Pit as well, because I was on Twitter at the time. I think I didn't like it because you're not allowed to like it unless you're an editor or something like
That's
that. So
right.
I think I did
No
like
hard
retweet it though. I finished my first novel in 2009 or 2010. Got rejected for about 10 years and then signed with my agent in 2019. We went on submission February of 2020. But again, my debut was a novel about two queer teens who survive a viral pandemic that wipes out most of the world's population.
Yeah.
So in February of 2020, everyone was like, oh, yeah, we want to see that immediately.
Yeah.
So my submission process, I feel awful for everybody else. I feel very thankful for myself because I was only on submission for 3 weeks. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
mean,
Don't hate me. Please don't
no,
hate me.
no.
But it was just timing. And I will say I think 90% of finally getting that like deal is just luck. It's luck that you have the right agent with the right editor at the right time. And then all of those things finally come together. And that is what makes your book sell. Because I mean, like you said, you were on submission for what, 2 years. So it's like you just needed those like that probably like the one editor who finally got a chance to look at it and went, you know what, I really like this. I'm in the mood for a story like this right now. I want to buy this.
Yeah, I mean, it is honestly all about stars aligning, and I wouldn't take my experience away for anything because my publishing house and my editor have been godsend. Like they have been such an incredible team to work with right from the get-go. And I always say like my book, a lot of people have said like, oh, this is so like nostalgic. There's early 2000 punk pop chapter titles. Like it's about Skater Boy. Like there's a lot to be said about it that evokes nostalgia. And while that's amazing, and that was obviously one of my goals with naming it Skater Boy and centering it around that, I don't think this book would have sold in the early days of YA queer novels exploding the way that they did in 2016, 17, 18. Because who's going to want to read about an angry gay? Like the appetite for that has evolved, and these like My Chemical Romance revivals and like the emo and punk scene like being revived, like this is the perfect moment for this book to come out. And so it was brutal while it was happening, but I'm so thankful that this book is coming out now when it is.
I'm a big believer that there's a plan for everything, and I totally agree that like that's like a perfect scenario for you, especially now that everyone's getting obsessed with having their own little emo phase, which that revival alone, I'm like, I am not old enough for you to be reviving things that I did in middle school. Can we relax?
I know. It's wild. And it's wild to see like artists like Fall Out Boy come back with new albums and like Avril Lavigne going on tour. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like my CD is so worn out from your first CD. Like, I cannot believe that you're like coming back.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I also am not fully convinced that it's actually her. There's a whole conspiracy theory. Do you know about that?
I know all about Melanie or Melissa or whatever.
I love a silly conspiracy theory. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, I'm sold. And that one, I was like, that's hilarious. I like this.
Does she lean into it? Like, I know she knows about it. Okay, good.
In true punk pop fashion, Avril is all for it.
I love
She's
it.
like, she'll hint at Melanie. She'll hashtag Melanie. I'm like, I'm obsessed with you.
I love it. I love it.
Enough to write a book.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's so funny. That's such a good revival.
Right.
So you were on submission for so long. Were you able to work on other projects at the same time, like to come up with like your next book?
Yeah, definitely. Skater Boy was actually the fourth book that I had ever written, and in the time that Skater Boy was on submission, I also wrote 2.5 books as well. So I have since, after finishing editing with my editor and sending Skater Boy off, like I've finished book 2, and that's on submission right now with my editor or with my agent. And I just over the holidays finished editing book 3, and so my agent's reading that right now. And so we'll see what happens.
That is one thing that I will say to any listeners who are aspiring writers. During the submission process, while it is taking forever, just work on the next thing, because you're going to get to a point when you sell that book and you're under deadlines on editing that book. And then as soon as you finish and you turn it in, they're going to want to see what your next project is. You'll probably have an option or they might include another book in the deal. And writing on deadline is a whole different other animal than writing a book that like you're kind of working through and figuring out for yourself. Like you have that kind of freedom and time to just kind of write it, see where the story is going. And then if it even works, sometimes you finish a book and you're like, this isn't working and I don't know why. And usually time is better for those kinds of things too, because then you get like a little bit of like distance from it and you can figure it out later. Like with my first book, I think it took me about 3 years before I finally realized what was wrong with it. It was the entire second half of the book.
The entire
had to
second
rewrite it.
half?
Yeah, I just had to rewrite it. That's all.
That's wild. See, I love reading. I used to really like writing when I was like in school, and now since then I don't really write a ton. But yeah, like sometimes I don't think that I could be like stretch my creativity enough to build a whole story. And I'm sure that there are like tools to like and processes that, like help me kind of figure that all out. But being creative enough to have several different stories, I just know myself, and I would end up writing the same story 800 times.
And what they say a lot of the times too is that like writing your second book is the hardest one because you're starting to be perceived with your first book, and people are commenting on them, and those things start swirling in your head when you're trying to just ideate your next story. And so I was really thankful, even in my querying days, like I always framed it in my head as like, oh, it's not if I'm going to become an author one day, it's when I'm going to become an author. So framing that in my head, I was always just going to write the stories that I wanted to write, and I never really worried about what would happen after I finished a book and it was on submission or being queried. And so I think it really helped that I already had a second and third book written by the time that Skater Boy had sold, because I had time to just let those simmer in the back burner. And while I was learning to hone my craft more with my editor on Skater Boy, I could then go back to those books and sharpen them even further with the skills I had already learned.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think even just writing my own, like reading my own book a million times, you know, like when you listen to your own voice and you're like, oh God, like I wonder if I would feel that way. Did either of you feel that way? You gave yourself the ick?
Oh, no.
I think it's different enough through writing that when I go to reread it, I'm reading it in the character's voice instead of my own.
Okay.
So like, even though I get comments all the time from people being like, oh, I can't see this character as anybody else but you. And it's like, I get that because it's like I do pull my own voice and lend it to the characters, but I'm still hearing different things from them. But there will be other times, though, that I'll be like reading something and I'm like, oh, this is awful. No, I'll just delete it. And then there's other times where I'm reading a sentence and I'm like, what does this mean? This isn't even English. And I'm just like, no, that must have been when I was like on a writing marathon and tired and didn't know what to put down. So I just wrote something and now it doesn't make sense anymore.
That's so funny. Anthony, have you had that experience?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever like had like a visceral ick moment, but it's true. Like when you read your book 50,000 times in the editing process, like in this current moment, I never want to read this book ever again, no matter how good I think it might be. But that's not to say that I'll pick it up later and be like, oh, I love this, or like, ew, why did I write this sentence? I don't know. Time will tell.
Yeah.
I will say it's different if you listen to the audiobook. So if you have not listened to that yet, listen to that when you like after a couple weeks after it's been out. Because I feel like even though I write these books, I will listen to the audiobooks. I did for the first one. I haven't listened to my second one yet. But it felt different, like while I was listening to it. I can't explain how, because I'm like, I knew what was going to happen because I wrote it. But it's just hearing somebody else kind of perform it. It feels like a totally different thing.
Yeah, I got to announce my audiobook narrator a couple weeks ago, and I have yet to hear his take on it. But when I was sent potential narrators to read my book, I listened to like 30 seconds of Michael Crouch, who I ended up picking, and I was like, this guy will do whatever he needs to, and I know it'll be perfect. So I have a hold on my audiobook from my library. And I don't know if that's bad that I'm taking someone else's spot.
That's so funny.
You should, because then you also get royalties, because the licenses for audiobooks are based on how many times it's checked out.
There you go.
So if you check it out a certain amount of times, you get a royalty for it. So.
I knew I'd like you, Eric. Thank you.
The same for audio or the ebooks. Check it out on ebook every once in a while too.
That's so funny. I'm happy that you get to choose the people who read your book, like read your audiobook. But it's also interesting because every now and then I'll get an audiobook and I'll listen to it. I'm like, oh my God, that is not how I imagined this person to sound at all. And now knowing that the author picked that person, I'm like, wow, okay, so my the way that I painted this person in my head is so different than the way that the author imagined it. I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's like it can be a whole theatrical process too, with like when it comes to audiobooks.
I like when they have like full casts that read it.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's my goal. One day to have a cast big enough and to be like popular enough of an author that they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna get like all of these well-known actors to come and read all of these parts.
Yeah, I was gonna say Adam Sass's latest release book, Your Lonely Nights Are Over, has a cast and a narrator, and it's so immersive. Like I don't
Yeah.
typically I don't typically listen to audiobooks. That's just not how my brain works. I envy people who do and who can listen to multiple ones at a time. But Adam's book was so engrossing to me because it was just such a cool, like eerie vibe that they put onto it.
Yeah. Are there any age groups or genres that you one day want to write but haven't been able to, or are there any that you know you'll never write?
I don't think I will ever, like, I'll never say never to anything. Like I said, like I'm very much a mood writer. Like if an idea comes to my head and it strikes me as something I want to pursue, I don't really care what the genre is. Like my first two books that I ever wrote were fantasy, and I always assumed I would be a fantasy author. So it's very funny that I'm like YA contemporary. But I have an idea right now in my head that's like an adult speculative fiction. So I don't think anything's off the table, but for now I have YA books and YA contemporary romances that I'm pursuing, and I just think I'll carve out my space there first before I endeavor into anything else.
What are you reading now?
Oh yes, I have it actually right here. I am reading The Space Between Here and Now by Sarah Suk.
Ooh.
Sarah is one of my good friends who is local, and it is about a girl who has sensory time warp syndrome, where she travels back in time when she smells something linked to that memory. And I just think like I am so into speculative, and this is like right up my alley. So I just started it a couple days ago, and it's been a wonderful read so far.
That's very cool.
Yeah, super cool.
I love it.
Alyssa, while we're wrapping up, do you have any questions? Any last questions?
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like I learned a lot about this whole writing. Every time we talk, I learn so much about the writing process, and that's been like very exciting for me as a person who reads as much as I do now. But I also
the point of our podcast.
I know, but I also have been thinking about how you were talking about how good people are mean. It's working. People are mean on Goodreads, because I use Goodreads. I don't write any reviews, but I use Goodreads to keep track of like what I'm reading. And I look at the reviews and I'm like, oh my god, these people are very intense. And I had a friend who once he was on Twitter and then decided it was a bad neighborhood and no longer wanted to be on there anymore. I feel like maybe Goodreads is a bad neighborhood.
Goodreads is a bad neighborhood for authors. Like it's not meant for authors. It's for reviewers and for readers. And everyone who's published will always tell you like don't go on Goodreads. But you know, like it's everyone's universal experience to be like, I can take it. I have such sin.
Yeah.
And then you just get one. You get one review, and it's
over.
For a queer writer like me, it's like a Republican who doesn't get the story at all, and it wasn't written for them to begin with. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess it's time to block this. I'm saying off of everything I own.
Yeah.
My favorite reviews. So I will say, I am in the, at one point, John Waters said, read all of your reviews, read your good reviews twice and your bad reviews once, and then never look at them again. I'm in that camp. I actually do read my reviews. Sometimes it's usually like the first couple weeks that the book is out, I'll just check in and be like, all right, how are people reacting to it? And then just to get an idea. But my favorite ones are always anybody who's like, oh, this book read like a YA and it just wasn't for me. 2 stars. And I'm like, it read like a YA because it very fucking clearly is a YA, and it is marketed as such. What are you talking about?
That makes me so angry.
Those are the ones I'm like, okay, cool. That I wish I was petty enough. I wish I was like secure enough in my ability as an author to just like those ones, like to go on as my author account and like it.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to start shit, so I'm just like,
I know.
I am such a I try so hard not to fight in the comments of things, but it happens occasionally. And like I did a Netflix show a couple years ago, and when there's like a Reddit for it, so I'm just a glutton for punishment. I was like, I need to know what people are saying. So I went, and of course, it's the same exact thing. They tell you not to look. And I was like, well, obviously I have to look. So I looked, and for the most part, everything was really nice. But every now and then you would get these random things that would just be like, she thinks she's so good at this game, and she's not even good at it at all. And I'm like, how did you even gather that from that? How did you gather? How did we get here? And I'm just sitting there like the little icon in Reddit is like blinking at me, and I'm like ready, and I'm like, I just need to take 3 deep breaths and walk away from this, and then it'll be okay. I can't respond. So I don't know how you do that, Eric, because you are stronger than Anthony and myself, because I can't. I'm too like fight immediately. I have no flight instinct. It's immediately fight.
If it's something that gets under my skin, I'll screen cap it and send it to the group chat.
Okay.
We'll talk about it for like 2 minutes, and then I'll just delete it from my phone and be over it.
Okay.
That's smart.
Because I think that helps. It's just being able to like talk to other people who are in the same kind of boat as you. So I just go to my author group chat and I'm like, yo, look at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that's what it's for. Like that's what your kind of your network and your community is for. You can go and you can talk about that and be like vent any kind of frustration that might be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you feel better about it, because it does help if there is something that really kind of sticks with you and it's like, well, you just didn't understand it and I want to explain it to you. It's like, no, screen cap it, send it to your friends and explain it to them.
Yeah.
Because they, regardless, are going to be like, you're right.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But if you argue on the internet, you're never going to be right, honestly.
Yeah. I remember someone said once to me, if you are in an argument with a toddler, you're the dumbass, not the toddler. And I feel the same way about strangers on the internet. If you get into an argument with a stranger on the internet, you're the idiot. It's you.
Also, there's the dead internet theory where these people aren't even real. They're all robots on the internet just creating things to keep people on the internet.
See, that's a conspiracy that hurts me. So I don't want to engage with that one. Avril,
that's a conspiracy that will make me not be on the internet.
That's good.
I mean, that's a good thing. More rating.
I'm leaving that one in the dust, but I'm taking the Avril Lavigne one.
Yeah.
We should all take the Avril one, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, while we're wrapping up, Anthony, thank you so much for coming in. Where can people find you on the internet that absolutely isn't dead and is full of real, live, breathing people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for all the real people, not the trolls. You can find me on any social media channels at Anthony Nerada. Anyone who wants to stay up to date on my Skater Boy release or my book tour that's coming up can visit www.anthonynerada.com.
Yeah, awesome. And remember, everybody listening, Skater Boy is out now.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Congratulations on your debut being out in the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
When she asks me how far we can take it, I tell her we can take it across the entire universe. You are my universe. I'm just a planet.
If this is your first time listening, make sure that you subscribe on whatever app you're listening to us on. You can also contact us on Instagram at YAOK Podcast. And let us know what you think of the show and what you're reading. Send us a little mini review of what you're reading, and maybe you'll hear us read it on the show. But you have to be nice. It can't be like those Goodreads reviews that are like, oh, this was a YA book, and I don't like YA. Then why are you reading it, Barbara? Put the book down. Stop spending your money.
Damn it, Barb.
Go touch grass.
Go touch grass. What are you reading now, Eric?
I am reading The Misdirection of Fault Lines by Ana Gracia. It is about 3 Asian teens who are at this tennis invitational, and it's just about them being like trying to kind of figure out their messy lives while playing tennis, and it's so funny. Anna is a friend of mine. She's probably going to be on the podcast one day.
Yay!
Maybe even to talk about this. She wrote the book Boys I Know, and it was one of my favorite books of 2022. It came out. It's so funny. Alyssa, I think you would actually love it. I think I'm going to send you a copy.
Okay.
Because it's amazing. It's
I'll
so
read it.
funny. It's all about girls who are kind of figuring out how to kind of figuring out the difference between sex and love in high school,
Oh.
and also like dealing with kind of fuck boys, like just getting in their way. And
I love
it's
that.
so wonderful.
I
What are
love
you reading?
that. So I'm still reading my Court of Thorns and Roses book. I can't remember it. I think it's Wings and Ruin is the one that I'm in, and that's just a long ass book. So I'm still reading that. But I also am reading The Sex You Want by Rena Martin. And if you could only see the amount of tabs that I have going on in here, because it is so great and powerful. And she's had her own like shameless sex coaching business on her own and has done some really amazing work for thousands of people. And so getting to actually read what she's doing in those sessions, one-on-one sessions, is really special. And she also was a former deputy district attorney, which is crazy. She was a district attorney for like 20 years. And then she ended up like getting a divorce, like hard reset her whole life. And now she does this instead. So she has amazing stories. The book actually starts with her paying for a dominatrix for the first time.
Oh, so cool.
It's really cool. And there's like journal prompts and stuff. So there's lots of good learning moments in here too. And I've been enjoying every single page of it. And I can't wait to talk to her too. Anyway, thank you for joining us this week. And we will catch you next time. Welcome to Welcome to.
I didn't do it.
Try
It
that
didn't do
again.
it. Why did I was
Oh, you
I
want
was
your
trying to
thumbs
get it
up?
to do it, but
The
it
fireworks?
didn't do it.
Okay. Welcome to
Take two.
YAOK.
Take 3.
Oh my gosh.
91 Donkey Lane is a magical apartment complex that contains immense power but lacks intelligent inhabitants.
What is happening?
I'm getting texts.
Why are we getting a lot of texts?
People found out what we did.
Oh, dividing Mike Myers into an infinite amount of tiny Mike Myers?
Listen to 91 Donkey Lane for free on Spotify or your favorite podcasting app. More at 91donkeylane.com. See you there, you donkeys.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.